This was definitely the least popular of the two questions that you could have answered on this paper. The other question was about education. So the question, how accurate is it to say the development of youth culture in the years 1955 to 79 was the most significant development in popular culture and entertainment in the years 1918 to 1979? So you've got to compare youth culture against other developments in popular culture and entertainment. And you've also got to evaluate or decide how you're going to evaluate significance, which makes this quite a tricky question. We'll talk about that in a moment, but first of all we need to decide what second order concept it is, and it has got the word significant in here, so this is a significance question. So it's not a causation, what's causing change in popular culture and entertainment, it's how significant it is. So two ways that you can think about significance in terms of development would be, well, it's got to be one, long lasting. So if a development is transitory or temporary, you would perhaps argue that it's not as significant. So it's got to be long lasting, and you could say it's got to have mainstream reach into wider society for it to be really significant. So those are two ways of perhaps evaluating significance, and you have to make that clear in your introduction. So in your introduction, you need two things. You need three things actually. You need your judgment, what's going to be the most significant. You need your criteria, so what are you going to compare youth culture against, and you also need to establish how you're going to tackle this issue of significance. So they've given you youth culture already in the question, so you've got to find two other things to compare it against. So when I did this, two things that I thought I would compare it against would be TV as important in the development of culture and entertainment, and also spectator sports. There are others that you could have picked. You could pick film, and you could have picked radio as well. Any of those would have been valid. So what I've done here, I've drawn three spectrums of significance. So the more significant I'm going to judge it to be, I'm going to put a mark on the right hand side. So my judgment is going to be that the development of youth culture is not the most significant. Two reasons for this. It's reasonably transitory because it's not there through the whole time period. It's a feature particularly of the 50s and the 60s is that where you really see a dominant youth culture. And does it really go into the mainstream? Well, it's quite contained amongst young people in Britain, so it doesn't always necessarily translate into the mainstream. My argument is going to be that the most significant development is TV because it has a long-lasting impact from when it starts in the 1950s, and also its impact is seen across all areas of society, across all groups in society, so it's got a very wide reach into mainstream society. And in the middle, I'm going to put spectator sports. The peak of spectator sports is perhaps, we're going to say, pre-World War II. So I've tried to pick something that's allowing me to have that chronological breadth, because the question does go from 1918 to 1979. So I'm going to say, well, it hasn't got that chronological importance or significance, because by the time we get into the post-World War II era, actually spectator sports starts to decline because of the impact of television. And also in the interwar period, its reach isn't entirely mainstream because it's very much dominated by your social class, and often it's restricted by gender as well. So what I've done here is, in the examiner's report, what it's picked up on, and what I quite like with this candidate, is at the end of each paragraph they keep linking it back to youth culture. They do a comparison of that factor with youth culture. So it's always coming back to this idea of relative significance. So at the end of this paragraph, paragraph 1, they say it can even be argued that the introduction of these other changes, such as TV and radio, encourage youth culture to happen. Therefore, it is inaccurate to say youth culture was the most significant, and instead argue that it was television which caused the most change and development. So we've got a comparison of our two factors. Again, they do it in the second paragraph. Therefore, TV is the most significant development as it massively shaped society and transformed the entertainment industry. This shows that whilst youth culture was a key change, it's not the most impactful. And finally, in the third paragraph, in the case of sport, mainly men benefited from it, as 70% of men were involved compared to fewer women. This suggests that while sport is an important development, its impact was limited. Therefore, the introduction of television is more significant because it changed the lives of many more people. So, just to emphasise, what they're doing at the end of each paragraph is comparing the relative significance of each of these factors, which made this a really strong response. Lastly, what I want you to think about is with this essay, there's always a danger that you drift into generalisation. So there's plenty of evidence that you can actually use in this answer. So what I've done on this slide is I've given you 12 facts that you could use to support your analysis about the relative significance of those three areas. So what I suggest you do is you stop the video right now and decide, well, is it relevant to TV? Is it relevant to spectator sports? Or is it relevant to youth culture?